Warning: this story contains graphic depictions of mass casualties and severe injury. Viewer discretion is advised.
The building is going to collapse and they make us work until midnight.
I had only moved a few feet when I fell and a beam came down on my legs. I was screaming for 2 days. They said, to save you, we will have to cut off your legs. And I said, cut them off. Because I want to live to see my children.
What we would also discover is the disaster that happened here was no accident.
On the morning of April 24th, 2013, thousands of people walked into a death trap. Just one day before, this poorly built 8-story building had been evacuated. Garment workers had seen the cracks in the walls, stared with horror at the fatal structural flaws that threatened to send thousands of tons of concrete and metal crushing down on their heads. But the factory owner had one message: get back to work or lose 1 month's pay. Poor and struggling to survive, they felt they had no other choice. At 8:45 a.m., they were at their stations, sewing clothes for best-selling Western fast fashion brands. But just minutes later, their worst fears came true. In 90 seconds, the 8-story garment factory in Dhaka, Bangladesh, became a deadly pile of rubble. 2,500 people were pulled from the wreckage with shattered bodies and missing limbs. It's the deadliest accidental structural collapse in recorded history. But was it really an accident? Engineers had measured the cracks in the load-bearing walls. Its owner, Sohail Rana, knew his building had been condemned in everything but name. And that morning, while his workers were being crushed alive, he was packing his bag. Today, amid this preventable tragedy, we uncover an unbelievable miracle: the story of Reshma Begum. Reshma survived 17 days, entombed, no real food, barely any water, and no way of knowing that anyone was coming to save her. What nightmares did she and the other survivors witness? How did one rescuer save a life, but accidentally end 2 others? And why did some people try to convince the world that Reshma's survival was a hoax? This is the story of the Rana Plaza collapse, a catastrophe that could have been prevented, and of a fast fashion industry that put profit ahead of human life. For 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, Reshma faced a bleak and unrelenting task: sewing garments to satisfy the fashion whims of Western consumers at cut-rate stores like Zara, Joe Fresh, and Walmart.
She sewed pocket seams, 150 pockets an hour.
And for all that grueling work, a meager wage: 400 takas, or about $60 a month. So for mere pennies an hour, Reshma would put her life on the line. At 22, she embodied the struggle of so many. The typical Bangladeshi garment worker is female, 23 years old, an internal migrant living with family in miserable conditions. And she and her fellow employees knew that Rana Plaza wasn't safe. On April 23rd, cracks appeared in the walls of the factory, and the workers scrambled out in fear.
We heard there are some cracks, and they said to go now and come back at 2 p.m.
Are you scared?
Of course we're scared.
Constructed illegally with poor quality iron rods and cement, on a filled-in swamp, designed for retail, not manufacturing, with 4 additional floors added after the fact, illegally, with another one literally in the works, owned by its corrupt namesake, Sohail Rana. You might be asking yourself, how could this happen? The answer is simple and infuriating: corruption. Building owners like Sohail use bribery, wealth, and political connections to skirt laws, regulations, or pressure officials into approving unsafe construction. Following the discovery of the cracks in the foundation, local engineers ordered an evacuation. For a brief moment, reason prevailed.
Then he called the engineer who came and looked at the pillar.
How was the pillar? Show me.
The pillar was a little bit bent. This is not a crack. There is a beam and plaster came off the beam.
The very next morning, workers were ordered back inside. Terrified about losing their wages or jobs, they complied.
They said, "Don't worry, nothing will happen. If you die, we will die too." But they didn't go inside. They made us start work and then left.
Rana Plaza shows us how shady corporations can treat ordinary people like commodities, stripping away their basic rights and exploiting them for profit. And while most of us will never experience this, a different kind of corporate exploitation is quietly happening to almost all of us today. And it starts with the phone in your pocket. The truth is, your current phone is tracking you everywhere you go. Your favorite restaurant, your place of worship, your gym, your kids' school events. And yes, even those late-night searches you thought were incognito. Every single movement and online search is logged, packaged, and sold hundreds of times a day to data brokers. Now, if your response is, well, I'm not a criminal, I have nothing to hide, that is exactly how the companies profiting off of you want you to think. Privacy isn't suspicious. Privacy is a basic constitutional right that every single law-abiding citizen deserves. That's why I switched to the Ghost Phone. Ghost Phone runs Graphene OS, the most secure mobile operating system available on Google Pixel 7a hardware. It's de-Googled, privacy-hardened, and built for professional-grade security. And guys, this is not a burner phone for criminals. It's the kind of secure device used by journalists, undercover agents, attorneys, and law enforcement. And it still works just like a normal phone. You can do calls, texts, apps, take photos, everything you need. If you'd like to get your hands on one, scan our QR code or visit zeroghost.com/howtosurviveshow and use code SURVIVE for $50 off your order. Now, back to the show. With a deafening roar, the 8th floor fell into the 7th, which both annihilated the 6th, pancaking the structure one floor after another, all the way down. In just 90 seconds, 3,100 people became smothered in twisted metal and concrete.
Less than 24 hours after these women expressed their fears, they were crushed to death, along with over 1,000 others.
Reshma Begum had one thought: run. So she raced for a stairwell, dust clouding her vision, threatening to clog her lungs. Terrified, trapped in the pitch black, with dehydration looming, Reshma's journey of survival was just beginning. Before we dive into her incredible story, if you're enjoying the show, it would mean so much to us to have your support so we could keep making meaningful videos like this one. We'd love it if you could hit the bell icon, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments with us. We're always looking to improve to make you guys the best possible survival documentaries out there. Now, back to the show. It took 90 seconds for Rana Plaza to collapse, and for Reshma to find herself in relative safety, in an open space near a prayer room. That is, after she managed to cut her long hair to free herself from the rubble.
I couldn't sit up because there was no space.
All around her, muffled shrieks of pain. And then, a terrifying silence. And as the temperatures increased, so did the smell of decomposing flesh.
When I regained consciousness, my head really hurt and I couldn't move it. I could hear people shouting, "Save me." I heard a man called Alamin. He was in a lot of pain and he asked for water. I said, "Brother, I don't have any water. How can I give you any?" Then he was shouting and crying about his feet. Then he was quiet. I touched him and he felt cold. I think he had died. There was an unbearable smell.
So how did Reshma survive? First, she found dried food scattered about in bags. And then she conserved it, eating the bare minimum. Then she secured fresh air by forcing a broken pipe through a crack, breathing shallowly to avoid fatal carbon monoxide poisoning. She also rationed water, which she managed to conserve even after she ran out of food. And then there's the intangible power of hope, which Reshma held onto as the rescuers all around her fought to extract lives, and all too often bodies, from the rubble. All while the Bangladeshi government refused life-saving emergency support from the United Nations. Immediately, local residents descended on the scene. 8 stories of highly unstable rubble was piled on a plot of land about twice the size of a basketball court.
I reached around 0918 hours, and as I could see, people, hundreds and thousands. No fire brigade and nothing. It is people, the laborers, the market people, those who were in the street. They all came running in thousands to rescue those who were trying to escape the debris. The building collapsed like a pancake.
Forget emergency gear, respirators, and heavy machinery. During this first wave, many wore only plastic sandals and worked with their bare hands. Fabric was torn into rescue ropes. Emergency workers would arrive as well, and as the world watched in horror, officials in Bangladesh made a mind-boggling decision. They refused help.
Bangladesh turned down foreign help, which the UN says had been offered.
It was like a grave. There was no light or air around me, just 3 dead bodies. One on this side and one on my leg and one over there. I pulled it towards me and rested my head on it. Though it was a corpse, I wasn't scared.
As the minutes, hours, and days ticked by, all around Reshma, people slowly died of crush syndrome. This results in muscle necrosis. Essentially, your muscles die, which can lead to multi-organ failure. It's absolutely brutal, guys. Others succumb to the long-term impact of inhaling clouds of toxic dust. Enraged, grieving family and friends clashed with police, who responded with tear gas. Rescuers were on their own and faced with heart-rending decisions. Imagine yourself in their place. The heat is stifling. You've probably already lost friends or family, but you press on, determined not to let someone else suffer the same outcome. You scratch and claw at rubble and dirt. You grab a loose piece of rebar or scrap of iron to use as leverage because you hear a voice. And then that voice calling out to you connects to a face, a living, breathing person. For now. But they're pinned down, a limb caught beneath a massive slab of immovable concrete. What do? Wait? Surely they won't survive. Call for help? None is coming. Your government made sure of that. Faced with that impossible choice, they decide to operate, though that term hardly captures what happened.
I was screaming for 2 days. Then some people reached me. They said, to save you, we will have to cut off your legs. And I said, cut them off because I want to live to see my children. They gave me an injection, but it still hurt so much. And I started screaming loudly. They said, if you scream, we are going to leave you here. Then they cut off my right leg. The pain was unbelievable. Then I started screaming again. This time they said, if you keep screaming, we will not cut off your other leg. I said, okay, brother, I'm not going to scream. Take my leg off.
I mean, that's absolutely insane. Now, to be clear, not every rescuer was working with their bare hands. There was the odd excavator, bulldozer, or crane. And some did have cutting tools, saws fitted with blades to slice through stone and steel, which undoubtedly saved lives, but in one bitter twist of fate, ended them. Why? Because it wasn't just what the building was constructed with that turned deadly. It was what was inside the complex as well. Mountains of highly combustible, cheap synthetic fabric, clothing labels, and textile dust turned the disaster zone into a tinderbox. On April 28th, 4 days into the tragedy, rescuers were no longer finding survivors. That was until they discovered Shaheen Akhtar. Scrambling to free her, sparks flew from a saw and ignited a fire, killing Akhtar and fatally burning a rescue worker. 16 days have now passed since the collapse. Hopes of finding the living have all but vanished. Heavy machinery that could have crushed survivors moves in. But somewhere deep below, Reshma Begum finds a metal pipe, a simple object that would help grant her freedom. As bulldozers and cranes cleared debris, a serviceman from the Bangladeshi army strained to hear any survivors still buried in the rubble. Somehow, amidst the clamor, he heard a faint sound. A rhythmic tapping, metal against stone. Frantically, they called off the heavy machines. They needed silence. Tap, tap, tap. They plunged into the dark, flashlights blazing, handsaws and welding tools cutting metal in two. Down they went. Then, a weak voice called out from the void.
I didn't think anybody could save me. Then I heard the call to prayer and I saw some dim light from outside. I was shouting, brother, is there anybody out there? Please save me. I was shouting for a long time. Nobody came. Then some soil fell on my head. Suddenly there was shouting above me. Sir, I think there is someone alive here. They called my name, Reshma, Reshma, take this light. When I got the light, I realized I had lost most of my clothes and I didn't want them to take me out like this. With the torch, I found something to wear and put it on. Then I waited.
It took another 40 minutes of painstaking work to free Reshma. Live television broadcasts beamed the ordeal to all corners of the globe. And when she was finally pulled into the daylight, Reshma was still able to walk. The crowd roared. Her survival was nothing short of a miracle. Paramedics administered oxygen to her struggling lungs, saline to restore her organs that had been fighting dehydration. A note about dehydration, it works in stages, starting with thirst, when 2% of your body weight is lost. Your kidneys send less water to your bladder. You sweat less, your body temperature rises, and to keep enough oxygen in your system, your heart rate picks up. Stage 2 is fatigue. Your head starts to hurt. You lose focus. Then comes dizziness, lightheadedness, and extremely dry skin. At this point, water isn't enough. You need electrolytes. From there, the symptoms become severe. Low blood pressure, loss of consciousness, fever, serious pain, organ failure, and death. In the end, over 2,000 people were pulled from the wreckage. 1,134 of them were dead, making the Rana Plaza the deadliest accidental building collapse in history.
Maybe I'm scared. People say, you are a brave girl, why don't you want to work in a factory? I say, I won't return to the factory.
And while Reshma's ordeal became a symbol of hope, it also became a chance for cynical operators to co-opt her story for their own gain. A conspiracy began to form. One male co-worker said he and Reshma had escaped together the day the building fell, that they spent 17 days together in the hospital, before she reappeared on television. An opposition newspaper spun the same tale, saying a landlady claimed Reshma had escaped on day 1. Anti-government activists said authorities staged her rescue as a distraction. A so-called investigative reporter highlighted alleged physical inconsistencies. Her sari was clean, her hands and fingernails undamaged, her eyes unaffected by the sun after weeks underground. For her part, Reshma rejected these claims as nonsense, saying, "Where I was, you were not there, so you have no idea." Her mother did too. Following Reshma's statement, the Bangladeshi military banned further questions from the press. But for the fast fashion industry that put Reshma's life at risk and took the lives of so many others, the questions were just beginning. So, would anyone be held responsible for this horror? Would the fast fashion industry be forced to change? Or would Western consumers continue to casually enjoy the fruits of the deadly labor performed half a world away? And what about the long-term damage done to the survivors themselves? Reshma was given a job as a public area ambassador at a local Westin hotel, but her life was by no means easy. Other young women had no choice but to return to the industry that took so much from them. As for the owner, Sohail Rana, he tried to avoid accountability the old-fashioned way, by running for the hills, only to be caught en route to India.
Building owner Mohammed Sohail Rana has appeared in court over the worst industrial accident in Bangladesh history. He was arrested on Sunday whilst trying to flee the country.
Rana was convicted of corruption and sentenced to just 3 years in prison. However, he and 37 others do face additional murder charges that could result in the death penalty. Those cases are tied up in court as authorities hear from hundreds of witnesses. The industry at large had to be dragged kicking and screaming to make amends. After 2 years of relentless campaigning, they established a $30 million victim compensation fund. Other changes came more quickly. Agreements on safe work conditions and inspections, legally binding accords between brands and trade unions. But deadly workplace accidents persist. In April of 2026, a fire at a Bangladeshi lighter factory killed 5. And as lives continue to be lost, the Rana Plaza sculpture of 2 clenched fists wielding the worker's hammer and sickle is a stark reminder of the price still being paid. If you'd like to learn more about the deadly cost of corporate negligence, check out our video on the devastating Bhopal gas tragedy. We'll see you next time on another episode of How to Survive.